What's up, everybody? Ryan Michael Ballo here to do another review on a nootropic, and today we're doing Huperzine A 1%. First of all, I think it's important to identify exactly what Huperzine A is. We'll go through the different versions, really in terms of percentages of Huperzine A in the package that you can get, and then what the effects have been for me, some warnings, and kind of what I think about everybody else trying it. Huperzine A is an alkaloid essentially extracted from a plant in China, to make it as simple as possible. And what it does in your brain is it stops this enzyme that breaks down a major neurotransmitter which helps you focus. The enzyme is called acetylcholinesterase, and that neurotransmitter is called acetylcholine. Essentially what this means is this allows you to have more circulating acetylcholine, this neurotransmitter, functioning in your brain. How it works at a more detailed level is at the neuron level. When a neuron sends a signal from itself to another neuron, the other neuron is what's called a postsynaptic neuron. It's essentially the neuron to which the signal is being sent to, the neurotransmitter is being sent to. On this postsynaptic neuron lies acetylcholine esterase, this enzyme that would break down the neurotransmitter acetylcholine when it lands on the postsynaptic neuron, and then recycle it for later use. But what happens here is, since that enzyme that breaks down that neurotransmitter is inhibited, the neurotransmitter just continues to the postsynaptic neuron and then does whatever it might do thereafter, which equals more focus, better memory functionality, and a host of other things. So that's Huperzine A, and is the best explanation as I can give. I have taken Huperzine A quite a lot over the course of the past 5 years. And my first experience with Huperzine A was really bad. I took way too much of it, and I had some serious side effects, and I'll explain those. Through the subsequent years, I came to realize that Huperzine A is something that is a really, really powerful nootropic if you understand how to take it, and if you're really careful about it. But it's so powerful that if you dose wrong, or you overdose on it, or you just take too much for it, or if you take it with acetylcholine precursors, other precursors for the neurotransmitter that this affects, then you might be running into some trouble, and we're going to get into that. So let me just start off with the dosage that I would typically take for Huperzine A, in line with this review. This is Huperzine A 1%. It comes in 0.5% and 1%. The difference is essentially, how you would look at this is like if you look at 8 milligrams of Huperzine A 1%, then that calculates to 80 micrograms, based on the fact that this, in that 8 milligrams, only 1% of that, that 8 milligrams is actual Huperzine A. So what that comes out to is 80 micrograms. So I guess that's kind of like an average dose for Huperzine A as well. But just understand that when you put 8 milligrams of Huperzine A on a on a scale and you're weighing it, you're not getting 8 milligrams of Huperzine A. You're getting 80 micrograms of Huperzine A based on the translation and the math you got to do. Whatever you put on the scale, 1% of that is actual Huperzine A. So that's important to note, and it's important to look at that and be like, wow, why is it like that? Why is it so little that affects you so positively or so much? Or why is the dose super small like that? And the reason is because this is extremely powerful stuff. And it fusses with an enzyme, acetylcholine esterase, that you really don't want to inhibit for too long. It isn't a great idea to inhibit it consistently. That's why I suggest not taking this consistently and cycling off. It's just something that you should approach with a lot of caution. So that's the breakdown on why it says 1%. The average dosage, recommended dose for Huperzine A, is between 50 and 200 micrograms, not milligrams. Please don't confuse that, micrograms. And the way that you measure it out typically is you can do the conversion like I just did. Okay, so 8 milligrams of Huperzine A, based on the fact that 1% of this is actual Huperzine A, translates to 80 micrograms of Huperzine A. Or what Powder City does and a lot of nootropics vendors do out there when they send you nootropics is they'll give you like a small little scoop, a small little red or blue or white scoop, and that scoop essentially fills 8 milligrams, which ends up being 80 micrograms, and that's like, you know, kind of the recommended dosage on this package here, and you know, and a lot the recommended dosage in a lot of other packages. So so you have to be extremely careful about the way that you're dosing it, so that you are not taking too much of it. And you know, this really requires that you're able to do the math on what is 1% of 8 milligrams in those kind of categories. Below milligrams is micrograms, and so that's where you come up with your 80 micrograms for 8 milligrams of material here. So all that stuff out of the way. The recommended dosage is 50 or 80 to 200 micrograms. I always say that specifically with Huperzine A, that you should probably take a lot less than 200 micrograms, and I would suggest that you start out with something very low, like 30 to 40 micrograms of Huperzine A. And if you think you can't find a way to measure that, you have to find a way to measure that. I would not start at 80 first. I would not start at 100 first. I wouldn't start at 200 first. I'd start very low and see if you tolerate it. If you don't have any issues, if you don't have any like vertigo or dizziness, it's like a common side effect, or upset stomach or nausea or confused thoughts or any heart palpitations or anything crazy, then it's like, okay, maybe you can dial it up. And if you've got good brain performance from there, you could also dial it up and see where you're at, starting from that low safe point of 30 micrograms or 40 micrograms. That isn't to say that you can't go all the way up to 200 micrograms or in excess of 200 micrograms by 50 microgram increments until you reach side effects. But I wouldn't suggest that, and my contention is that is for a certain subset of people that brains can handle that for whatever reasons. You know, that possibly is acetylcholine levels, the neurotransmitter that this ends up affecting and creating more of, are already extremely low, so that they don't get side effects when they have, you know, a lot of it floating around in their brain as a result of taking the Huperzine A. So I would start on the low dose range and then work your way up if you can. Cycling. Then I'll get to how it makes me feel, because I'm sure a lot of you think like, well, what does it do to you? But all this stuff is very important first. Cycling. I think that you should cycle on and off of Huperzine A pretty religiously. It's not something that I think you should take every day. It's not something you should take 4 or 5 times a week and then cycle off on the weekend. It's something you should probably take for 2 to 3 days and then cycle off for 4 days. Take it for another 2 days, cycle off for 5 days. Take it for a day, cycle off for 6 days. And in between, at the end of that cycle, this is sort of a good reasonable cycle. At the end of that cycle, take 2 weeks off. Rinse and repeat the entire thing, and then once you get to the end, take a month off. And the reason that is because there's a lot of discouraging science, and I'll see if I can link as much as I can, like below if I remember, or someone else can do that in the comments section, that essentially says that taking too much, inhibiting the enzyme acetylcholinesterase is not good long term. There is a lot of stuff that is used in war, in other chemicals that are extremely malicious against the human brain, and one of the main components of them, I think one of these things like mustard gas, if not like it's something similar to that, is acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Those are inhibitors of acetylcholinesterase that are irreversible. So essentially, you inhibit acetylcholinesterase, this enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine and recycles it, forever. And that could kill you, and that could, or could leave you with the side effects for the rest of your life. Luckily, Huperzine A is a reversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitor, which means that the effects will reverse themselves, and you'll end up being okay, even if you take too much. But I still don't suggest taking too much. Okay, so down to the effects of Huperzine A when taken very carefully and when measured very specifically, and with considering all of these warnings that I've laid out. Huperzine A, to me, to actually give it some credit instead of just beating it down for this whole review, is one of the most powerful nootropics I've ever taken ever. And I've taken like everything, except modafinil, which is ironic, right? But I'll try it soon enough. And Adderall is very scary to me, so I'm probably never going to try that. And I don't consider, the latter a nootropic. So, but man, compared to everything else, this is one of the best nootropics ever. My working memory is amazing when I take Huperzine A. I mean, I can just hold so much in my brain. And looking at math savants and people that can compute a lot of math data in their head at once and kind of simultaneously hold all of this information when they're doing a very complex equation, a very long, complex equation. I look at that and go like, that's how they do it. They must have extra acetylcholine in their brain, or their brains must be working in a way that's similar to the state that Huperzine A is inducing, in my neuronal functions. So working memory seems to be like extremely improved. The capacity to control your brain. One of the things I really enjoy about meditating is being able to sit down and control my brain for the subsequent hours, the subsequent days, and it sort of builds up over time. The more you meditate, the more you control your brain. From reacting to things you don't want to react to, from reacting to stress in your own mind, from sitting in a stressful place, period, from being angry at somebody who does something stupid or something that you don't like, whatever you think it is, and or being able to have control over the systems thinking that you might want to employ about a particular situation. Just be the actual CEO of your brain. Encompass and embody that of the role of the prefrontal cortex, which is to be the CEO of your brain. So it really gives me this kind of control over my brain that I do not have at baseline. I have to some degree because I meditate and take other nootropics and I take care of myself, but not to the degree that Huperzine A is able to induce. It's very powerful. My speed of processing, while it has the capacity to be extremely fast on Huperzine A, since I have this level of control over my brain, it doesn't necessarily have to be. It can be what I need it to be if I'm engaging in something quantitative or where I need a lot of computational power, but it doesn't do that excessively and out of my control, which is very, very cool. So you have the capacity to go fast if you want to, but you don't have to go fast if you don't want to, and you control it either way. That's very awesome. What else? I think that one of the, to me, one of the most powerful effects of Huperzine A in the past has been, like when I sit back and look at it and my effects from it, has been I can sit down and work on something for just a ridiculous amount of time. The amount of time that, like, under normal conditions, I'd want to get up after 2 hours and take a break or pee or drink water or something. With a good dose of Huperzine A, I just don't want to do any of that. I just want to work, and I have the capacity to do it for a very, very long time. And that is super interesting. And that's essentially it. Extremely powerful working memory, the capacity to control my brain, the capacity to go fast if I want to, but the capacity to slow myself down if I need to, and an ability to work for a very, very long time. I can hold a lot in my brain at once. I can do a lot of computational stuff, and I can get a lot of work done without even being fatigued mentally in terms of my processing. I can just keep going, and that becomes very useful in a myriad of things, from me being an entrepreneur, running 2 companies now, running my businesses, and or sitting in front of QuickBooks doing a sort of financial task, which requires me to really, really hold a lot of information in my head, or something that's a little more mindless but still requires some information, some processing speed, and all this other stuff like bank reconciliation in QuickBooks, for those of you who have companies and use QuickBooks Online or other analogs of QuickBooks to manage your data, manage your money. Interesting stuff. Side effects, and I'm going to go into a very quick story. The side effects, if you take too much of it, are nausea. You can feel essentially like you don't have a sense of, you really can't control the way that I don't know what the system is called, but essentially you get vertigo, where you feel like your head is spinning, or you feel like you're kind of dizzy and you can't control that. Your coordination and balance and hand-eye coordination might be off, and this has all happened to me when taking higher doses than 200 micrograms. You might actually throw up. You're probably going to run into some insomnia, and depending on the person, you might run into some other negative side effects. One of the positive things that does happen as a result of having so much acetylcholine in your brain is you have lucid dreams. You have interesting dreams that you can remember, and if you're a person that has the inclination or the capacity to engage in lucid dreams, that is a dream where you could control the outcome. You sort of know it's a dream, and you get to kind of just do whatever you want within the dream. Then it'll be easier taking Huperzine A to go and do that. And for some people, it just might happen naturally. You might just actually have a lucid dream, as a result. But either way, for most people, you're going to have some pretty vivid dreams. This happens when older people start eating a lot of fish again. I've had employees of mine for other companies that are unrelated to nootropics that took my suggestions of eating, twice a day salmon for 2 weeks, and they come to me and be like, dude, I started dreaming again, and I can remember all my dreams. Yeah, well, I mean, that has a lot to do with the acetylcholine in there. That fish might create. There's a lot of choline in some salmon or other fish, and probably has to do with the omega-3 content in those foods also. But this will induce those states for sure. Quick story, and then it's over. We're going to end the review. I took probably about 1,000 micrograms when I probably the second time or third time I tried Huperzine A, because the first time I had a good experience with it. And this was not a good experience. I mean, this was me being careless and thinking, oh, it's a nootropic, if I take too much, whatever, I'll just be wired or whatever. That's not what happened. I took 1,000 or more micrograms. I didn't even measure it. I put it in a water cap and put some water in it and threw it down. And within about 20 minutes, I was puking my brains out consistently. Then after that, I couldn't do anything else but sit down. And then it got to the point where I just had to lay there and be like, oh, what happened? Like, what did I do? And that lasted for about 8 hours. The interesting thing that happened to me during this whole experience was that somewhere around 6 or something hours into it, I was trying to go to sleep, and I actually fell like halfway asleep, where I went into paralysis, sleep paralysis, which is what you normally do, but my brain was totally conscious and totally awake and totally, and I had like this computational power and this logic capacity that I'd never ever had before. I was sitting there like, oh, this still sucks, and I'm paralyzed, I can't move, this is really creepy, it's so psychedelic for me. But I could process a lot of math in my brain right now if I really want to. Like, I was sitting there doing math in my brain and running through equations and thinking back to like Algebra 1 in high school and why I failed it and like how easy it was. I just didn't give a crap. And I was like, dude, this is crazy. And I started thinking about some problems that I was having in my life, and I started solving them in my brain. And I actually woke up the next day like with solutions to problems, because I had logicked them out in my brain, and I had the capacity to kind of hold it all together and draw those conclusions to create those solutions. But that happened at the trade-off of me feeling that I felt like crap. It was really, really bad. Super hangover the next day, essentially. And I don't suggest taking more than that. But I don't want to make this like a negative review about Huperzine A if you think that that's where it's going, because it's totally not. I just want to implore people to understand, and I want to put a lot of emphasis on the idea that you should dose very carefully when it comes to Huperzine A. You got to dose super carefully so you don't run into those side effects, and understand that the right dose for you is what you want to be looking for. From a scientific perspective, you approaching this scientifically is what I mean. You got to go, I got to find the right dose for me. And I got to start low and work my way up and find that sweet spot that makes me have all these positive benefits and virtually no side effects. Lastly, I would not, it's hard, right? Because people are going to be like, well, I have it, it's okay with me. I would not take Huperzine A with any acetylcholine precursors like alpha-GPC, CDP-choline, DMA, centrophenoxine, Alcar to some extent. I wouldn't take it with those, because then you're just like looking at potentially creating a taxing on the cholinergic system. Too much acetylcholine floating around your brain, and thus negative side effects. If you want to experiment in that direction, once you find your sweet spot for Huperzine A, I would start very small. Like, say your sweet spot is 50 micrograms of Huperzine A, and you want to take some alpha-GPC. Start at like 20 milligrams of alpha-GPC. GPC and other analogs of acetylcholine precursors you take in the milligram quantity rather than a microgram quantity. So I would just start very low, 20 to 30 milligrams, and then work your way out from there and see what happens. If you start to develop brain fog or depression or any of the other symptoms that I laid out, then you've gone too high and you should probably remove the acetylcholine precursor and just stick with this. Just stick with the Huperzine A. But ultimately, my suggestion is just stick with Huperzine A, start there first and see where the heck you are at. Overall, like I said, it is extremely powerful. And it's extremely awesome in the right dosage. I mean, it's great. So my review on it is, in summary, it's really awesome. It's one of the best nootropics I've ever taken. Probably, and I'm going to plug Cortex, probably besides Cortex. That's why I put it out, because it rocks. And besides aniracetam and some of the other racetams. But it is I would say, with certainty, it is the most, it's the nootropic that you have to be the most careful about. And to me, it's the nootropic that I have to be the most specific about the dosage and not like carelessly experiment. Like, hey, let's just throw a little more in here. Don't do that. That is a bad idea. Thanks so much for watching. You can get this from Powder City, I'm sure. I would suggest getting Huperzine A 1% if you're new to this, and then you can kind of go based on my dosage recommendations. And if you haven't tried our product, Cortex, which is in the back here, it's launching February 20th. You're probably watching this either right before February 20th or after February 20th. Grab a bottle, you're going to love it. If you hate it, you can send me some hate mail. I'll be okay with that. You never have to buy it again. But most people that take it love it. All the beta testers, all of them. And they're not just trying to like, you know, blow smoke up my ass or just be nice to me or whatever. And some of these guys are my friends that would tell me, some of these guys are people that I served in Iraq with that would tell me I'm being an asshole if I'm being an asshole. They all loved it and they all reported great results with no side effects. So you know, and I took a long time to formulate the product, so it is a very solid product. Cortex Gen 1, pick up a bottle, I think you'll love it. Other than that, share this if you loved it, please. Subscribe if you're a YouTube person and you like nootropics, because I'm going to keep cranking this stuff out, and we'll talk to you next time.